All right, so I'm here with my friend Emil, and we just met online. And Emil is a game designer and self-publisher as well. And he recently launched a Kickstarter campaign for Rogue Angels, right? And then just like my experience with the Ghosts Betwixt, I had to retry my Kickstarter campaign. So today, Emil and I thought it would be fun to talk about, running Kickstarter campaigns, some of those obstacles, relaunching Kickstarter campaigns, and just some of the hurdles that us self-publishers, game designers encounter. Gonna have an open-ended conversation. This is actually the first time we've talked, so I have some questions for him. He has some questions for me. And we're gonna see what happens. So we're gonna kind of go from there. So Emil, do you have anything to add to that introduction?
No, it's cool that I was able to reach you and we could find a way to meet.
Absolutely,
really nice.
Absolutely. One thing, I'm glad you said that. One thing that I wanted to mention is, and I've said this a bunch of times, by far the best part about this whole experience, there's a lot of amazing things that have occurred, but by far the best is all the different people I've got to meet, around the world. It's absolutely incredible. Like a bunch of people who I consider friends now that all came through this game design experience. I don't know if you've encountered that as well.
Yeah, it's like, and you can say it's probably due to there not being that much money in the industry. Like it just keeps people grounded to and very friendly, and that's great. I mean, you can get the both of from good things, right? There's definitely a possibility to run a business in this industry, but there's a much bigger possibility of actually getting a lot of friends. So yeah.
Well said. Well said. That's awesome. Okay. All right. So Emil, my first question for you, and I mentioned this a second ago. So both of us, I don't know if you knew this about me, maybe you did, but with the Ghost Betwixt, I ran that initial Kickstarter campaign, I want to say 3 years ago, and the first one did not succeed. So I had to recalibrate, try it again, and then luckily that second attempt did succeed. Now I know you've had a couple other successful Kickstarter campaigns with your other games. With Rogue Angels, I know a lot of people are excited about this game. It looks incredible, but for whatever reasons, just didn't fund this time around. So can you tell me and anybody watching kind of what's the current plan with Rogue Angels, and what did you learn from that first campaign that you're going to try to fix or recalibrate with your second attempt?
Yeah, that's a very, very big question. The question above all questions. No, I mean, there's a lot of things to take away from whenever you have to cancel a campaign, of course. So, and the thing is, because I've had to cancel or not cancel actually, I just didn't fund my first attempt as well, like way back in the days. And there's a lot to take away from having to just see it not really reach the funding goal you need. And the biggest thing is that Kickstarter has changed a lot these last 3-4 years. Kickstarter have changed a lot compared to how it was before then, and how like things have become so streamlined, and so like there's one way to play the Kickstarter game today, and you can't really go against the established rules, like unwritten established rules. Even as much as you want to kind of cater to the indie feel and the indie way of perceiving Kickstarter, that's not an option anymore. Like you have to approach it in a different way, I would say. So I had to cancel my Kickstarter here in February, and very early on I could of course see that this is not going to happen. So I, instead of like drawing it out, or I decided to cancel and to set a new goal, like to be okay. There's no way to relaunch within a couple of months. I would much rather wait half a year and then make sure I do the steps correctly. So now I'm looking at August, September.
Mhm.
So before the big conventions and before there's a avalanche of games coming out again, right? Because October and November is insane. So yeah. So
Cool.
that's my first priority, is to set a new goal and make sure I build from there. And then there's a lot of other things to unpack within that, and learnings from there.
Sure, sure. Well, so I'll quickly share what I did with my relaunch. I'd love to, if you don't mind sharing, like if there's one major thing you plan on changing. For me, what we had to do, I think I may have alluded to this in a previous video I made, but had to cancel that initial Kickstarter. It was a little bit too lofty of goals. Our funding goal wasn't exceptionally high. It was somewhat reasonable, but for whatever reason we didn't get there. But what we decided to do was, the Ghosts Betwixt was a story I've been working on for a long time, and in that game, in the initial game, it was going to tell the entire story. So what we decided to do for our second attempt was to cut the story in half, and therefore we could reduce the number of you know um, manufacturing components and art budget and all that sort of stuff. So then we were able to lower our goal and then ultimately reach the goal we needed. So that really saved the project, and really it was a blessing in disguise, because it allowed me to slow down a little bit, really um, dive a little deeper into that first half of the story, if you will, instead of trying to rush through the entire story through all the different missions. So I really do think the game is better because that initial campaign did fail. So I'm actually glad it failed in a funny way. So are there any major things you plan on doing to try again?
Yeah, there definitely is. Like I have several points. Like my goal was also too high, based off the thing that I wanted to produce my game in Germany, in Europe,
Mm,
which is by almost all standards impossible. And I can see that. Right? I've been working with Ludofact, and they were very engaging and very happy to have me on board, because the game itself and the things it kind of encapsulated was also intriguing to them, and they were very engaged, and we worked together for half a year on trying to adjust and refine the components and all these things so that it would be feasible to be printed. And even though we went, and I wanted to do without miniatures, because I don't paint miniatures myself, so that wouldn't make much sense, and I don't think it enhances the experience for anyone else and those who really put a lot of time into painting the miniatures. So I wasn't catering to the miniature fans by default.
mm,
um so all these things, like when I took the decision of having it produced in Germany, just m- made it impossible to make a low funding goal, because if I only got half of what I needed, then I would have to sell my house or whatever. I cannot do that. So
mm,
and I didn't want to be in a situation where I would fund like 300 or 50,000 dollars, and then I would really need 400,000, and I would have to cancel, or I would have to make up for it in some other weird way that would be very uncomfortable. So everything stems from my perspective of what I wanted to do, as a vision of how I perceive my company and how I wanted to produce things under better circumstances that you can offer in Germany and compared to China and stuff. I mean, I have many good relations with Chinese manufacturers. That's not the point, but there are some things to be said on a geopolitical scale, right? Without getting into any particular details.
Yep.
But in the end, it is not possible unless you're ordering 50,000 copies or something like that of a game that only has cardboard components. Sure, then it can be done in Germany for a fair price, but it's not competitive otherwise. So
yeah.
So that's one thing, the funding goal, which again will just it leaves me to I need to go back to China and find the manufacturer there, which I had already I had compared prices and I've looked into my previous manufacturers and stuff. So, and when we already at that point, I'm also like, yeah, I could put miniatures into the game. Like I could do that. I'm not really a miniature fan, but
Right.
I can see that is also what people want.
Well, yeah.
So
And you alluded to the kind of tried and true recipe for a successful Kickstarter. And in the genre of games you and I are in, I think it's pretty apparent that if you include miniatures, we've seen campaign after campaign take off. And most of the time, not always, but most of the time in the genre of games that we are producing, they do include miniatures. So I think you and I are in the exact same spot. I used to like miniatures when I really started getting into games, and then they started piling up, and I don't have the time to paint them all. And then I love getting a game and breaking it out, and all the pieces fit artistically and all the colors are the same color scheme, and it looks beautiful straight out of the box. So I'm with you, not in love with miniatures. I still appreciate them, but I knew when I made my game, for a lot of reasons, and we could talk about this, but perhaps on a different chat, but there were a lot of reasons why miniatures just didn't make sense in my game either. I think they in some ways limit your flexibility in the design. For example, if I wanted to create a boss character that just shows up one time throughout the campaign, does it make sense to spend the money to craft a miniature for one fight? So there's a lot of reasons why I decided against miniatures, but at the same time, to your point, I think it did hurt some of the optics of the campaign, for whatever that is. It's just part of that recipe that if you go down the list, miniatures is on there for, hey, that's a check mark for this recipe that's gonna hit that funding goal that we all want. So, well, okay, sounds good. So you are, just to be clear, you're gonna stick with the standees. Is that what I'm hearing?
I will stick with standees for enemies and for heroes, but I will probably, that's what I'm aiming at, once I get the estimates of, for the new setup, is that I would have an add-on for the heroes miniatures, which are, there are 20 miniatures or 20 heroes. So, those could be minis. The thing is, if I do it with the monsters, I put details and information on the monster standees. So if I suddenly turn it into a miniature, then I would need a monster card, which again, then you expand the footprint that the game needs, which is, for my game and experience, is a fairly small footprint compared to what it actually tries to do. And I kind of like that, because it's like, it doesn't look daunting. It doesn't take a lot of time to set up or take away. And I don't want to ruin that, because that's also a selling point and a thing. Like we've talked about, we both have 2 kids, right? So we we don't have time for 40 minutes setup, right? We want to get going and play right away.
Absolutely right. Yeah, interesting point. Yeah, and for me too with miniatures, that's a really clever thing you mentioned. The standees having the information of the monster or enemy on there, that makes a lot of sense. For me, in my game, you can attack a monster from behind and then do additional damage. That's one kind of mechanic in combat, and one decision you have to make. Do you want to spend a move to get behind a monster and then hit it from behind? With a miniature, I'm just not sure how that would work. Can you really tell if the miniature is facing left or right or which way? But with a standee, it's it's 2D, it's very obvious. And then we all obviously, each character has a art for the front and for the back.
Nice.
So it's clear. So that was just, again, the standee made sense in that respect. So that's interesting to hear. And I think that's a clever design strategy you did to save space, put information on that standee. You're kind of two birds, one stone sort of situation.
When I do it, that's a whole nother thing, right? When you go into playtesting and whatnot, right? But one thing I do not want people to is being like, so it does like, and then over there and be like, I will just, I'll just look in the rule book and then it will go back and be like, oh, do you have this card and this card? And you're like, no, that's because then if you do that, then you're suddenly, competing with a different set of games. Like I wanted to go below that type of game, So.
Yeah. All right. I have another one for you. So let's talk about marketing a little bit, which is one of the most important parts of this whole thing, right? So you've obviously done a good job marketing several of your games since they exist, right? And I know Rogue Angels will probably fund next time around because, before you and I even met, I knew of your game. So I think you did a good job on that. But what do you think is the hardest part about the whole marketing aspect of this process?
That's a good question. Because a lot of it is very easy. It requires a lot of time. And then there is the hardest part, which is finding the thing that will break through. Because most other things like doing Facebook AdWords, all these kind of things, whatever you want to do of ads or something on the base level, it's fairly simple. It's something most people can do or can learn to do. And also being on BGG, be a helpful person, try to be, to inspire people, try to, create some sort of content or give out, help in whatever manner you can, it requires a lot of time, but it's not hard. Like it's not hard to be a good person. It shouldn't be, but things have also changed a lot, also on BGG. And I would not say it's not like to say that everything has changed for worse or anything. It's just when it comes to marketing, and it has become so professional now and so streamlined that one of the only ways to get effects are either by finding this X factor, which is of course very, very hard to find, or by putting more money into it. Like, and if the only solution you have is just spend more money, then you're in a very, very red market, and you're in a very, very tough spot, because that's not a good solution in general. If you can afford it, it's fine, but it would be much better to find some of those unique elements. And I remember on my first game that I had these die ships, which, you know, those figures that could contain dice in them and stuff. That was very unique for the time, and is still not something I've seen a lot of. So, you know, so that was a selling point. It was something that was easy to convey. It was something that could be utilized, but it was also easier back then to what could you say, create some fuss or create some hype or whatever you want to call it, disturbance on BGG, and get on the hotness list and whatnot, right? Where you want to be, you know, if your game wants, you know, you want your game to sell. And this time around, when I did the Rogue Angels, I had around 30 reviewers who all really liked the game. Like, I have not had that with my other projects. I just haven't. And this game, like, everyone has a lot of positive to say about it. And of course, the hesitant of, it's still a prototype, sure, but it is praises, is a lot of praises, to an extent where I've been like, maybe they're all in on it. Maybe at some point they will just be like, ha, gotcha. But even so, I did not appear anywhere. I did not get any, you know, there was nothing, even though there's a lot of videos on BGG, you know, because they're being uploaded or referred to there as well. So it's harder to get into the zone of awareness today. So yeah, the hardest is definitely the X factor.
I would agree with that for sure. I think everything you said, I experienced myself for sure. And, you know, and again, we ultimately funded, but it was very difficult. And I would say it's still difficult. You know, I still have a decent number of games left over from our first print run. So I'm trying to, you know, still promote the game, still get it out there. And then any revenues I make are going straight into chapter 2, art budget and all that stuff to make that project a reality. So, you know, I still feel like I'm marketing. You know, hence why I'm starting to create more videos, and not just because of that, the learning from awesome people like yourself. But that X factor, yes, I think I also was looking for that X factor. I think if you're not as a game designer, you're probably missing something. But I thought, and I still do, I think the theme of my game, you know, dungeon crawlers generally are fantasy based or sci-fi based, and rarely is there a dungeon crawler that doesn't fall into one of those two categories. So I thought my X factor, and it still holds true, it would be a attention grabber to people who like dungeon crawlers but were looking for something new and maybe a little relatable, you know, in a familiar setting. The suburbs of Midwestern United States or wherever around the world, you know, that many of us can identify. And everybody likes haunted houses and everybody likes Halloween and that sort of stuff. So that's where kind of the theme came from. What I didn't anticipate is, while yes, we have a lot of fans and supporters, and that is great, and I'll always be grateful to them. But I do think a lot of people that do like dungeon crawlers, there's a reason that most of them are fantasy based or sci-fi based, because that's the genres people like. So I have been surprised that there are a lot of folks out there who have just not even looked further into this game. Just, I think, because of just the theme itself. Maybe it looks a little cartoonish, a little childish, which isn't what I had anticipated conveying. So again, X factor, super important. I'd say that's one of the X factors in my game. But sometimes that X factor may not be for everybody. I think I learned, you know. So
yeah.
one other thing I would say is I've found challenging is, and I don't know the solution to this necessarily, but it's like you mentioned, there's so much competition, especially just now versus, I mean, even 3, 5 years ago. I feel like there's probably more people like us. It's never probably been easier to self-publish a game with all the resources out there now. Um, I feel like there's a list of published tasks to do to publish a game and to design a game. So now the international shipping and all that stuff definitely didn't help, but still there's a lot of people out there trying to get their games noticed by enough people to fund, right? But ultimately, it's going to make your process a lot easier if you are able to get your game on the major reviewers, radars, Dice Tower, Man vs. Meeple, go down the list. And I've struggled getting their attention. I feel like I've gotten the attention of a lot of the smaller reviewers who, more sometimes focus more on niches or genres, adventure games, dungeon crawl games. So I have a relationship with many of them, and they've been awesome supporters. But the more mainstream, because their audience is so huge, and a lot of people just kind of have enough time in their days or their interests that they just kind of maybe hit those major reviewers, and that's maybe all they really pay much attention to. So it is important to get on their radars, and I haven't figured out exactly how to do that, but we'll see. So I'd say for me, that's one major hurdle for me, is like, how do I get this game to be viewed less as like an indie game, which I always want to maintain that, but still get it into more of a mainstream audience's view. So I don't know if you've encountered that, if you've had much success on the more mainstream side, or if you.
No, I think just like my first games I had, I paid, what was it? It was Tom Vassell. I paid $200 for a review. Like, you cannot get anyone to for $200. Like, I mean, I just I just stumbled across a fairly new, or I don't know, like a bit of a YouTube review channel, board games and such, with 20,000 subscribers or something. I hadn't seen them before, but they just popped up, and I have a list of like 400 or 500 reviewers, right? But there was a new one, so I wrote to them straight away, and they were like, first thing, yeah, sure, we can review your game, $1,900. Like, yeah, what? Like $1,900. Like, I mean, everyone should be paid for their time. I completely understand that. I'm not here to get free stuff. But if I were an established company, I sent you a game, then you would just do a review. And I'm like, there could be somewhere in between where you could be like, well, if I took $50 or $100 for a established one, I could take $300 or $400 for a, I feel sometimes there's a bit of a prey tactic on Kickstarters, because they need the the views. But I'm also sometimes convinced that it's the Kickstarters that bring the videos the amount of views that they have. So I'm not always sure, if it's the egg or the chicken, so I'm people are completely I'm okay with whatever. Like, I mean, the market is what the market is. So I'm just, I wish there was a bit of a balance, because I feel the prices for getting a review for a Kickstarter game has gone up to a point where it is the the ones who can spare that sort of money is usually the ones who don't necessarily have to go to Kickstarter. And they can do that that's in their power, but
absolutely. Yeah. And it goes back to just the number of campaigns there are every week there's more and more campaigns, I feel like, than there's ever been before. I don't know if that's true. It's just from what I've seen, it just seems like there's so much, call it competition, amongst designers and publishers, and we're all vying for attention, and a piece, just a small sliver of the pie, so our dreams can be made as well. And you're right. A lot of the competition is CMON games, right? And I mean,
it's hardcore business.
They throw the new Zombicide on there, and it makes millions and millions of dollars. And then there's some scraps for the rest of us to fight over. So it's just, that's how do you get those scraps? And I think but at the same time, I think that's just the reality of the situation. I think I really think it's fun. I think I wouldn't want it any other way, to be honest with you. I don't think this whole process would have been as meaningful if it was easy, if the backers were just flowing through. I remember when I was getting backers, and our campaign started to, it's really exciting when you first launch that campaign, and it grows. But then after the first couple days, usually starts to slow down. But then when you keep getting that next backer, or even now where I'm at now, if somebody purchases
order the game
or a website, it just feels really just meaningful. It's because I feel like, I don't know if you feel the same way. I feel self-made. I feel like everything that I've been able to achieve, which is not all that much, but I'm really, of course, excited where I'm at. But it's just, when you do get a backer, when you do get another purchase, you just know it wasn't because I threw more money at it and I got this much backers back. No, it was what you referred to earlier. It was doing stuff like this where we're just sharing our experiences, or being on Board Game Group or Board Game Geek, and answering every question as friendly as you can, because you're a good person and I'm a good person, and because it's just something you want to do. You're excited about your game, so you want to fully answer their question. You don't want to just say no or yes or maybe, so all that effort, all that is, I think, marketing, all the communication you have with your potential backers, customers, support groups. I think is all part of it. Well, I can sit here and whatever my initial point was, where it's kind of tough to reach that mainstream. It just feels like there's almost two different worlds. There's the mainstream where you make a game, you throw it out there, and the machine that is the board game industry and social media and all these Facebook groups and YouTubers. And once that snowball just gets rolling downhill and it just picks up all this momentum, and then everybody hops on and everybody's excited. And it's that FOMO. We've all seen those campaigns just light on fire. That's like one world. And I don't want to speak for you, but for me, it was, I don't know, my snowball was at the very bottom of the mountain, and just had to really everything I could just to generate some stuff. So it's just the reality situation, and I'm very proud of the group I have. It does feel like a bit of a community that I've helped create, and not just me, but I'm sure you too have your kind of major supporters who also want to be your advocate, and they want to see your game succeed, see your dreams come true. So that's important also, to really make some strong relationships with some of your supporters, and because you don't want to be the only one talking about your game, you want other people talking about your game as well.